The White House seems to have a higher turnover rate now than McDonald's, but is it justified? Join us as we have a look at some of the most high-ranking officials to be fired by Donald Trump so far. James Comey. Now this is a big one. Seriously, if you weren't scratching your head about whether or not the president might be into some hot water before, this could be a major red flag. The role of FBI director is an important job, which shouldn't be taken too lightly. And as we know, Comey did make some blaring mistakes during his time, but did he really deserve to be ousted by the president? It is incredible to discover that Comey was only the second FBI director in history to be fired from his position. In 1993, Democratic President Bill Clinton fired Director William S. Sessions, a holdover from the George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan era. But otherwise, it's been a position with little error by those who hold the post. Comey became a controversial government figure that was blasted by both sides for the way that he handled the Clinton email investigation and the Russian interference investigation in the 2016 election. Comey gave testimony in front of the White House Intelligence Committee in March, where he publicly confirmed the FBI was investigating if Trump and his associates had colluded with Russian officials in order to influence the 2016 election. Now, during an investigation like this, the FBI director wants to keep their investigation as vague and secret to keep it running smooth as possible, so that those being investigated can still lead relatively normal lives. But there were quite a few hiccups and mistakes, which eventually terminated Comey's position. And now we know why. The recent release of the memo detailing the FBI and DOJ's involvement with the DNC would reveal that it was actually Hillary Clinton who paid millions of dollars for a dossier that would lead to an illegal FISA warrant to investigate Trump's then campaign manager in an effort to persuade the election in her own favor. All of this information, as it turns out, was seemingly being hidden by the FBI, and it only seems to justify the firing of James Comey. Sally Yates. In another bold move by the president, he chose to fire Sally Yates. Yates was an appointee of President Obama and acted as the Attorney General, but she refused to uphold Trump's executive order on immigration and even denounced the act as being unlawful. Yates had also informed the president days after his inauguration that Flynn could be vulnerable to Russian blackmail. Yates was ousted from her position because of her betrayal to the Department of Justice, all when she refused to enforce a legal order which was designed to protect American citizens. However, she stayed vehement with her belief that the act was unlawful. And of course, this stance was mostly symbolic, as Yates would be removed as acting Attorney General once Sessions took her place, and Sessions did choose to go ahead with the president's executive order. Oh, and Yates has also become a household name when she was removed from her position by the president for not doing her job, but it was this bold move that made her name explode all over the media. She declared that she would be prepared to testify at a hearing where she warned the White House about Flynn 3 weeks before he was fired. This contradicts the administration's version, which states that Yates merely gave them a heads up on some comments which may have seemed in conflict with what he had sent the vice president. With the release of the recent memo in regards to the DNC's meddling with the election, it places Yates back in the spotlight once again as a potential accomplice to the collusion that surrounds Fusion GPS, the PP dossier, and the illegal FISA warrant. Preet Bharara. Bharara was fired as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Manhattan after he refused to submit a resignation to Jeff Sessions. Now, originally, Trump had wanted Bharara to remain in his position. It's not uncommon for U.S. attorneys to vacate their position when a new administration enters into the White House. In fact, many Obama-era U.S. attorneys were either fired or resigned on their own terms. One of the most interesting parts about Bharara's firing, though, is that it was during a time when investigations were taking place. And since his firing, Bharara has revealed that Trump made unusual phone calls to him, which he felt had violated standard boundaries between the executive branch and some independent criminal investigators. He was also removed shortly after a Fox News segment by Sean Hannity, who advocated a purge of all Obama-appointed Justice Department employees employees. It was an interesting move, but not uncommon. In fact, Democratic President Bill Clinton also requested that all 93 U.S. attorneys resign the day that he took office. Tom Price. It's not really too hard to see why this top-level executive ended up getting the boot. He, after all, cost U.S. taxpayers over $1 million. He did this between his use of private planes for domestic travel and military jets for recent trips to Africa, Europe, and Asia. In an interview, President Trump said that he wasn't happy about his choice for the health secretary's frequent use of the private planes for personal travel. Now, it wouldn't be so outrageous if it wasn't being done by Price, who had at one time billed himself as a fiscal conservative, one who called out multiple White House Democrats who wanted to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on private jets themselves. First off, if you're employed by the government, you should probably have to sit and coach like the rest of the people you're representing. You know, get a real taste of what being a fiscal conservative looks like. But we're sure now that Tom Price is out of a job, he did get a nice taste of his own medicine. Rumors would circulate that Price resigned from his position before Trump was able to fire him. Anthony Scaramucci. The Anthony Scaramucci show began to pick up hot ratings and then ended as fast as it began. Yeah, we do feel bad for the White House communications director that he was dismissed less than 2 weeks after being appointed, but we have to admit that the expletive-filled tirade that he made against members of the Trump administration is kind of how we all feel from time to time after watching the fake news. Anthony Scaramucci promised a massive White House purge in his tirade, and he even correctly foresaw the exit of Reinhold Priebus, the White House chief of staff, along with his impending resignation. Scaramucci became angry after having a tweet from a New York reporter telling of his whereabouts with the president. He was so angry, in fact, that he contacted the reporter directly and threatened to fire every member of the communication staff unless they gave up who had tipped off his whereabouts. Apparently, the reporter in question wasn't about to budge because part of his job is to protect his sources. And that's when he got the interview of a lifetime with Scaramucci, who made headlines with an expletive-filled tirade against the administration. Scaramucci was so angered by Priebus for supposedly having leaked his financial disclosures to Politico that the entire thing blew up. But of course, it was in Scaramucci's direction, and the president had to force his resignation because he was unleashing a rain of media masses for his outbursts. Reinhold Priebus. This guy couldn't last for more than 6 months as President Trump's White House chief of staff, and that's saying a lot. However, it was his very public feud with Scaramucci that would end up costing him his job. Trump announced in a tweet that John F. Kelly, the Secretary of Homeland Security at the time, would be the one to take over for Priebus. Now, apparently Priebus had been against hiring Scaramucci as the new communications director and had worked diligently to block Scaramucci's appointment. However, Trump would hire him anyways. Another White House member resigned shortly after Scaramucci's appointment as well. Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, would immediately announce that he was leaving. Spicer and Priebus were allies and worked together for the Republican National Committee. There was also a rumor that Priebus was forcefully pushed out of his position because Trump was convinced that he wasn't strong enough for the role, and had even discussed numerous times that he wanted a general to lead the administration. It is interesting that the controversial feud between Priebus and Scaramucci created such a rift that both men lost their jobs, and Sean Spicer chose to leave the administration on his own. Steve Bannon. If Steve Bannon was one thing in the White House, he was definitely one of the most controversial and outspoken members of the Trump administration. So we were actually shocked that the two explosive men had been able to get along for as long as they did. Bannon had actually been an instrumental figure all throughout Trump's campaign, shaping and creating a sort of brand with Trump's fan base of far-right voters. Apparently, though, Trump had begun to have enough when Bannon began to take credit for the president's success. And news of Bannon not being so trustworthy began to go around as he had leaked information to numerous reporters. In all honesty, though, it was much of Bannon's own ideas that influenced the current president's agenda, and it even still may do so, even though he's been ousted by the president. After exiting from the Trump team, Bannon then went on to declare a political war on Democrats, helping to push along Republicans in the Senate primaries. He also went back to continue his former work with Breitbart, where he said that he could spread his own agenda, even if the president continues to drift farther to the left with his policies. Only time will tell right now with the administration, but so far, it's not really difficult to see how influential Bannon has been when it came to creating a brand around Trump, even perhaps in laying out some of the most bizarre choices for the president's agenda. Upon his departure from the White House, Bannon did say that he did not want to hurt Mr. Trump and that he would remain reserved about other administration officials. These officials include Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Only time will tell what's in store for future Trump officials and the shape of the administration within the White House leading up to the 2020 election. Many Americans are craving for a significant change. They've been waiting for years and years to find a president that would truly be able to turn the economy around. Someone who can promise significant, unconventional changes. Someone who doesn't hold back. A possible underdog that won't screw them over. And someone who's not a corrupt politician. A person who has ideas and stands behind them. And